John M. Browning was the greatest gun designer the world has ever known, without question. His designs are still used today, some that were designed back the turn of the century.
We're in the Browning Firearms Museum in Ogden, Utah. John Browning was the son of Jonathan Browning. Jonathan Browning was a pioneer that came into Utah. He started out in Brushy Fork, Tennessee. He and his first wife had 12 children, and eventually he moved into the Salt Lake Valley, checked in with Brigham Young. Brigham Young assigned him to move to Ogden because they already had a gunsmith in Salt Lake City. So the Brownings came here to Ogden, and this is where they set up their business and their livelihood. And Mr. Browning at that time became a polygamist, and he married 2 other women. The second wife, Elizabeth Clark Browning, is the one we get excited about here at the museum because she gave birth in 1855 to John Moses Browning. She also gave birth to Matthew Sandifer Browning, a brother of John, and those 2 brothers worked in their dad's shop and repaired lots and lots of guns. John Browning was a gifted inventor, and even though he didn't have any formal training in mechanics like our engineers do today, he was able to see and feel how the guns were to go together. This is the first gun that John Browning invented. He was 23 years old when he invented this gun and showed it to his brothers and his dad, and a decision was made to manufacture the gun here in the shop. Now, one of the decisions they made is the receiver of the gun, which is this part right here that takes the most abuse when the gun is in action. That receiver was made out of hardened steel. Now, Ogden at that time was a frontier town. There was no steel mills close. So they bought the steel for these receivers right here at this train station. They used the axles out of train cars. They made up about 600 of those guns and sold them out of the shop. One of those guns somehow made its way back to New Haven, Connecticut, and it was taken in and shown to the general manager of Winchester Firearms Company. His name was T.G. Bennett. Mr. Bennett looked at the gun and said, "That is the finest single-shot rifle I have ever seen in my life. We need to have that for Winchester's lineup." According to our information, Mr. Bennett himself rode the train from New Haven, Connecticut, all the way here to Ogden, Utah. This is back in 1878. Walked up to Washington Boulevard, where the store was located at the time, went and negotiated with John and his brother Matt for the patent rights and the manufacturing rights for this gun. It was sold to Winchester for $8,000. And that way, the Browning boys were able to do some things and set up the Browning sporting goods business here in Ogden. That started an 18-year relationship with the Winchester Firearms Company. And basically what Mr. Browning did was invent for Winchester, and most all of the long guns that he invented went to Winchester. This is the 1895 Winchester. Mr. Browning invented this gun to hopefully sell to the military because military contracts is a desirable thing to have. That's why it looks like it does today. It's a military gun. Unfortunately, our government didn't like it. They liked the bolt action better. And so Winchester sold these guns to the Russians, and the Russians loved them. Later on, the gun was sporterized and offered to the American sportsmen. This became the favorite gun of Teddy Roosevelt, President of the United States. He liked it so well, he bought 3 of those guns and set up a shooting range on the White House lawn. This particular gun here is known as the 1890 Winchester. Mr. Browning was contacted by Winchester and asked to design a gun that would be aesthetically pleasing, would work well and sell well. Because at the time, Winchester did not have an offering that was selling well. So Mr. Browning designed this gun, sent the paperwork back to Mr. Bennett at Winchester. They looked at it, overviewed it, and sent it back, and came to the conclusion that this gun would never work, so don't spend any more time working on it. So Mr. Browning just laughed, took the paperwork down to his shop, got with his brothers, made up a rifle, put a little note in the box with the rifle, and sent it to Winchester, and the little note said, "Seems to work okay for us." And after Winchester saw how everything worked together, Winchester made millions of these guns. A lot of them went into the shooting galleries that was popular at the beginning of this century. In the 1890s, Mr. Browning wanted to develop a gun that you could start firing and it would continuously fire until you ran out of ammunition. Now today, we call it a machine gun. Back in his day, he called it his apparatus. This is the first machine gun that he developed. It's a 45-70 machine gun. This was showed to our Navy Department, and the Navy Department was interested in a gun that they could strafe the top of a ship with for 3 minutes. They figured if they could do that, they could control that ship. He took this out to Colt and sat down in Colt's pasture, had a tripod made for it, had a seat welded on one leg of the tripod so he'd have some place to sit down. He had the gun loaded with a belt of 45-70 ammunition. He sat down on a tripod and fired this gun 600 shots a minute. That's 600 rounds a minute for a total of 3 minutes of 1,800 rounds. The Navy Department was absolutely thrilled. And because of that, this gun became the prototype for the model 1895 machine gun. And we have the original model that was made in 1895 right there on the pedestal. That is in, my understanding, 7mm caliber. And then from there, we come up here to this little receiver. This was the next machine gun that he developed, and this was a 30 caliber machine gun. And he wasn't totally satisfied with that because it ejected the spent cartridges out to the side, and he thought that would not be comfortable for the soldiers using the machine gun. So he went to the one that's up above that, and that is the next model he developed, the 1910 model, and it ejected the spent cartridges out the bottom, and that became the prototype for the 1917 Browning that we have back there, which is a water-cooled version, and that was used extensively in World War II. Now later on, they developed an air-cooled model, and this becomes the 1919 air-cooled model, and we actually have two 1919 models. This is the 1918 50 caliber machine gun. The soldiers call it the Ma Deuce, which means the M2. That gun is still being produced today and used by our military forces. Later on in his life, he went over to Belgium to Fabrique Nationale. He passed away over there when he was 71 years old, working on one of his inventions for Fabrique Nationale, known as the high-power pistol.
The thing about John M. Browning and his designs were that they were so simple that they couldn't malfunction. And that might sound a little funny to some, especially in today's high-tech world. But there are software packages out there that many gun designers use today that require much more technical background than John M. Browning ever had. But yet, their finished products don't work as well as John M. Browning's simple designs did. Today, Browning is not only a firearms company, which it was initially, but it is a company that offers the shooting and hunting market all kinds of products, from firearms to accessories and clothing and whatnot. Well, if you look at the firearms industry today, you will find that many of the guns, especially in the sporting, from the sporting side of things, are John M. Browning designs. Even though they're made by other companies, the design itself goes back to John M. That's how significant his designs were.